Hi everyone, welcome to today's video on Act 2, Scene 1 of Macbeth. Before we get started, I want to check your knowledge on a couple of things which are going to be absolutely crucial to your understanding of this scene. So first of all, pause the video, have a go at answering the questions, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, answers then. Number 1, Macbeth is going to be Thane of Glamis, that's Glamis. He's Thane of Cawdor, that's Cawor, and then King of Scotland. Now we know that Macbeth was already Thane of Glamis because he inherited that title from his father. He became Thane of Cawdor when the original Thane of Cawdor betrayed Duncan and was executed, and then Macbeth was given that title. He's not quite King of Scotland yet, but he's going to be pretty soon. Sorry for the spoiler. Second one then, the prophecies for Banquo were that he was going to be the father to a line of kings. Now, the historical character of Banquo is a little bit more ambiguous than Shakespeare suggests. However, it's important to know for the play that King James I believed he was descended from Banquo. So within the play, this idea that Banquo's descendants are going to be king kind of came true, even if history doesn't quite back that up accurately. Okay, the third one, a soliloquy, is a speech given by a character that no one else hears on stage. It's as if the character is voicing their thoughts aloud. The motif number 4 is a symbol or a word, an image that's repeated all the way through the text. And dramatic irony is when the audience know more than the character. Another bit of information we need to know before we get started is the motif of light and dark. So again, pause the video, jot down your thoughts on this motif. That could be what it symbolises, it could be where light and dark is referenced in the play, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, so throughout the play, light is a symbol of hope, of positivity. It's associated with heaven, with purity, with innocence. Darkness then is the flip side of that. It's associated with evil, with hell, malevolence, Macbeth's dark desires. And I've got some quotations on the screen here that we've already looked at from the play. So Banquo in Act 1, Scene 3 talks about the instruments of darkness. There he's talking about the witches as being agents of the devil. Then in Act 1, Scene 4, in a soliloquy, Macbeth says, "Let not light see my black and deep desires." He wants to hide his malevolent desires from all that is good in the world. Lady Macbeth echoes this in Act 1, Scene 5. She says, "Come thick night." She wants it to be totally dark so that nobody can see her evil thoughts and her evil plan. And she says that she doesn't want heaven to peep through the blanket of the dark. Again, she wants all light and hope and positivity and purity to be extinguished so that kind of darkness, evil, corruption can reign. Okay, so here's the scene itself, and you'll see some of those things that we've already mentioned being picked up as we talk about this particular scene. So it starts with Banquo and Fleance entering with a torch. And Banquo says, "How goes the night, boy?" And Fleance says, "The moon is down. I have not heard the clock." Banquo's question really means, what time is it? How far into the night are we? Remember, they don't have any, wristwatches or phones to check the time on. And Fleance says, "The moon is down. I have not heard the clock." Banquo says she goes down at 12. Fleance, "I take it 'tis later, sir." Banquo, "Hold, take my sword. There's husbandry in heaven. Their candles are all out." Now, this whole discussion at the start of the scene sets the father and son relationship. They seem to be quite friendly. They are quite relaxed with each other. But as well as that, Shakespeare here is emphasising the total darkness of this scene. Now, if you imagine the theatre that Shakespeare's audience were originally watching in, it was open to the air, there was no roof on this, and so a lot of the performances would take place in daylight. So Shakespeare needed the characters on stage to talk about things like whether it's light or whether it's dark, so the audience would know what it was supposed to be like. And the idea of darkness here suggests that the witch's evil power is seeping through the play and taking control, and it also foreshadows the evil action that Macbeth is about to commit in the act of regicide. Then Banquo continues when he's handed Fleance his sword, "Take that too. A heavy summons lies like lead upon me, and yet I would not sleep. Merciful powers restrain in me the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to in repose." Now, here Banquo complains about the fact that he can't sleep very well. And he talks about cursed thoughts that seem to be quite unnatural. And these thoughts are invading his dreams and they're keeping him awake. Now, later in the play, Macbeth also talks about how his mind is being tormented by thoughts and guilt at what he's done. Here, Banquo isn't quite talking about guilt, but it's a similar kind of idea. The witches have infected both Banquo and Macbeth's brains, and here Banquo is potentially thinking about how he can get the throne and make the prophecy for his sons come true. However, unlike Macbeth, Banquo doesn't act on these thoughts, whereas we know that in the next scene, Macbeth is going to go ahead and commit regicide. Then Macbeth and the servant enter, and Banquo seems pretty jumpy here. He says, "Give me my sword, who's there?" Remember, it's pitch darkness. Now, what's also interesting about this is that actually the enemies have been defeated. MacDonald is dead, the Thane of Cawdor, the original Thane of Cawdor, is dead. The Norwegian forces have been totally destroyed, and Scotland is free and safe. Yet even so, Banquo seems really on edge. So there's an awareness here in Banquo's mind that there can be treachery from within as well as from the Norwegian forces. And Macbeth responds, "A friend." Banquo relaxes a little bit here and he says, "What, sir, not yet at rest?" He's saying, "Why aren't you in bed?" He says, "The king's in bed. He hath been in unusual pleasure and sent forth great largesse to your offices. This diamond he greets your wife withal by the name of most kind hostess, and shut up in measureless content." Now, here Banquo talks about how completely generous and benevolent King Duncan has been towards Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. He says that Duncan has given him great largesse, so he's given Macbeth a reward of money. And then he's giving Lady Macbeth a diamond to reward her for being such a hospitable hostess. Now, the dramatic irony here is so incredibly thick, because we know that Lady Macbeth is planning to push her husband into murder, and we're almost at that point of the murder at this stage in the play. The word hostess is being echoed here from earlier in the play. If you remember, Duncan called Lady Macbeth our honoured hostess. And then in Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth reflected on he is the host of the party and he should not kill his guests. So here, what Shakespeare's doing is really emphasising how generous, benevolent, kind, giving King Duncan is, and really showing us the injustice, the unfairness, the kind of utter horror of the murder of Duncan that's going to come in the next scene. And Macbeth replies, he says he was unprepared for Duncan's arrival. He didn't expect it. Being unprepared, our will became the servant to defect, which else should have free wrought. And Banquo says, all's well. So Macbeth saying there that he's unprepared for Duncan's arrival, and Banquo says, don't worry about it. The party was great. It's absolutely fine. And then Banquo quite abruptly, quite quickly changes the subject. And he says, "I dreamt last night of the three weird sisters. To you they have showed some truth." Macbeth says, "I think not of them." Now, this sudden change of subject is interesting because this is clearly what Banquo really wants to be talking about, and it shows just how much the prophecies of the witches are weighing on his mind. And the fact that Macbeth has had truth, he's become the Thane of Cawdor, the fact that he has had a true prophecy is clearly interesting to Banquo, because if that's come true for Macbeth, then actually Banquo's prophecies might come true as well. But Macbeth's response is really kind of curt and short. "I think not of them." Now, we know here this is a complete facade. He's being totally deceptive. He has done nothing but think about the witches. However, he's pretending that he hasn't thought about them. And then he says, "Yet when we can entreat an hour to serve, we would spend it in some words upon that business, if you would grant the time, Banquo, at your kindest leisure." So here they're planning to talk about the witches' prophecies a little bit later on. And Macbeth says, "If you shall cleave to my consent when 'tis, it shall make honour for you." And Banquo, "So I lose none in seeking to augment it." So they're going to have a conversation about the witches' prophecies at some point in the future. But Banquo emphasises here that he's going to keep his bosom franchised, his allegiance clear. Now, allegiance, that's your loyalty to someone else, and Banquo's loyalty is to the king. So when he says here that his loyalty will be clear, he's saying it's not going to be corrupted, it's not going to be made evil. I'm not going to do anything to destroy my loyal service to King Duncan. So it's almost as if they're dancing around this conversation about the prophecies and what they're going to do in relation to them, what they might do that would potentially be destroying that loyalty to Duncan. And then Banquo kind of pulls the conversation back and says, no, I'm absolutely loyal to my king. And then Macbeth ends the conversation and said, good repose the while, as in good night. I hope you have a good sleep. Banquo, thanks sir, the likes to you. Banquo and Fleance exit. And Macbeth turns to his servant and says, go bid thy mistress, when my drink is ready, she strike upon the bell. Get thee to bed. And the servant exits. Now, of course, he's not really talking about a drink here. What Macbeth means is he's sending Lady Macbeth a coded message that when the chamberlains, when Duncan's servants are asleep, they've been drugged and they're fast asleep, ring the bell so he knows it's time to go and murder Duncan. And the servant exits. Okay, little moment to pause then. I want you to pause the video and write down what you learned about these three things: Banquo's thoughts and dreams, Macbeth's relationship with Banquo, and Duncan's generosity, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, so Banquo's thoughts and dreams, we heard that they were cursed, so he's thinking about the witches and these thoughts are tormenting him. And then he tells Macbeth that he's been thinking a lot about the witches. Macbeth's relationship with Banquo, well, they are good friends, but at the same time, it seems a little bit tense, a little bit on edge. Banquo's initially quite anxious as to who's coming to speak to him. He does relax when he realises that it's Macbeth. But during the conversation they have about the witches' prophecies, Banquo makes it really clear that his allegiance is to King Duncan. So there's a lot of tension in this relationship. And then the third thing, Duncan's generosity. Well, he's given Macbeth money, he's given Lady Macbeth a diamond. This is really emphasising his benevolence and reminding us that Duncan is not the kind of king who should be killed. He should be let to reign because he's a good king, a kind king, and he deserves to keep the throne. Okay, before we look at the next section of the scene then, take another little pause and I want you to write down everything you know about the motif of blood in the play. What does it represent? Where have we seen it? Take about 2 minutes to jot down your ideas and then start the video again. Okay, so blood appears in the play in a couple of different ways. The first way is that bloodshed in the service of the king is celebrated. It's a good thing to unseam your enemies from the knee to the chops. It's a good thing for your sword to smoke with bloody execution as long as it's your enemies that you're killing. So when Macbeth is fighting the Norwegian forces, when he's killing MacDonald, that bloodshed is celebrated because it's patriotic, it's in service to the country. Then in Act 1, Scene 5, we learn that blood is associated with emotions. Lady Macbeth says, make thick my blood. The slower your blood goes around your body, the less emotional you are, or at least that's what they thought it was in Shakespeare's time. But shedding the king's blood is treason. So we learn in Act 1, Scene 7 that Macbeth thinks about the bloody instructions that plague the inventor. So he knows that shedding the king's blood is going to lead to a great feeling of guilt and torment because he's going to regret breaking the divine right of kings. Okay, let's look at this final soliloquy then. This is the second section of this scene. So Macbeth starts by saying, is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee, I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to failing as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat oppressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. I see thee still, and on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood which was not so before. There's no such thing, it is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Now, as I was reading that, I'm sure that some of you felt a feeling of panic because you were thinking, there's so many words here, I don't understand, the sentences are quite complicated, how am I ever going to get my head around this? Well, one of the really good ways of getting your head around Shakespeare is to watch a production of it. And that's what I'd recommend, because seeing the visuals of it can really help you to understand the thoughts that the character is thinking. because if you see their body language, if you see their facial expressions, if you hear their tone of voice, that's really going to help your understanding a lot. So first of all, I'd recommend that you watch a production of it. The Patrick Stewart one is really over the top and can really help you to interpret what's going on in the characters' heads. The second thing that we can do then is focus in on those words, those phrases that we really do understand, and not get too stressed about the ones that we don't. So in yellow, I've picked out some things here which I think you'll be able to understand without much help, and which actually are the foundation of this whole soliloquy. So in yellow at the top then, it says, "Is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle turned towards my hand." So Macbeth sees a dagger towards him. However, there wasn't one there before, so this is a hallucination. It's a vision of a dagger hanging in the air in front of him. And then he says, "Thou marshallest me the way that I was going." Now, at first glance, you might think, marshal? Not sure about that word. But think about where you would see a marshal in society. Maybe you've been to a football match, maybe you've been to a concert. Where would you see a marshal in either of those places? You might see one in the shopping centre, or when the fire alarm goes at school, I dress up as a marshal. So normally in our day and age, marshals would wear high visibility jackets, and they would point people in the direction where they're to go. If you go to a football stadium, the marshal will show you the way to your seat. So this dagger is a marshal for Macbeth. It's not a dagger with a high-vis jacket on it, but it is a dagger that's pointing the way to Duncan's bedchamber, showing Macbeth the direction to the murder that he's about to commit. And then we learn that this dagger is covered in gouts of blood. Now, you might not know what gouts means, but you can see that it's in the plural. So this dagger is absolutely covered in blood. It's foreshadowing the murder that's about to take place. And then Macbeth says, "It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes." So this is a hallucination. Macbeth is so worried and kind of tense about the murder he's about to commit that he's seeing things which represent that murder. And we've got the motif of blood repeated here as well. This is not the bloodshed that's celebrated in Act 1, Scene 2, where Macbeth is killing his enemies. This is the bloodshed that is criticised in the play because it's horrific that Macbeth is about to kill his cousin, his guest, his king. Okay, let's focus in on this bit then in yellow. So Macbeth asks the dagger, "Art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from a heat-oppressed brain?" Now, I love that phrase, heat oppressed brain. Imagine when you get so incredibly hot, you just cannot bear it. That's the kind of feeling I have here. I don't do very well in the heat. And this is the start of Macbeth's torment. We see his torment later on in the play when he talks to Lady Macbeth about how his mind is full of scorpions. And both of these images are about intense suffering, about the pressure that Macbeth feels in his own brain because he's being pushed towards regicide and he's pushing himself towards regicide, but at the same time he knows how profoundly wrong this is. Okay, let's keep reading the second half of the soliloquy, so we'll pick it up where it's in yellow at the bottom of the screen. So witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings, and withered murder alarmed by his sentinel the wolf, whose howls his watch thus with his stealthy pace, with dark Tarquin's ravishing strides, towards his design moves like a ghost. Okay, so again, I've just picked out some keywords. I'm not going to get stressed about all of the vocabulary that maybe we don't know, but we're going to focus on the words that we do know already. We've got witchcraft. Well, we know that we've already seen the witches in the play. The witches are pushing Macbeth towards this murder. We have the wolf. Normally we think about fear and danger and eeriness when we think about the wolf and the howls. Think about where you might hear that in a horror film. We've got the word ghost as well, which suggests something really uncanny, really unsettling, really nerve-wracking. I've added the word Tarquin in here, and you probably don't know the word Tarquin, or in fact who Tarquin is. Tarquin is a character from another Shakespearean text who attacks, in fact he rapes a female character in that text. So here we're thinking about someone who's a criminal who really harms other people. So all of these words added together create this sense of danger, of violence, and it's a really ominous feeling at this point in the soliloquy. As we move towards the end of the soliloquy then, we hear the bell at Lady Macbeth rings, the signal that guards are asleep, it's time for the murder. And Macbeth says, I go when it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. So the knell is a death bell, and this is signalling that Duncan is about to be killed. Now, Shakespeare wasn't allowed to show the murder of the king on the stage. In fact, it was illegal to show the killing of a rightful king on stage at the time that the play was written. So we just hear Macbeth talking about what he's going to do, and then he leaves the stage to go and commit that murder. Right, so much information there. Stop the video and just think it through and list 3 things you remember from Macbeth's soliloquy, so that bit we just read, 2 things you remember about Banquo, and 1 thing you remember about Duncan. Okay, and check out the next video, which will be on the next scene.